Hi, this is Evelyn Lopez. Welcome to another episode of Sustainability in Your Ear, the Earth911 podcast. This time, we are coming to you for the week of September 2nd, 2019, just after Labor Day. And we are thinking about lawns and late summer allergies. I don't know about you guys, but it's a time of year where all of the lawns are turning brown around us, and water bill is getting a little higher. So we want to talk about a few alternatives to the outdated idea of a lawn. And by outdated, I am saying that because the lawn, the construct of a lawn, is actually a Victorian idea. We also want to talk about recycling inhalers and allergies. So welcome. I have on the podcast today, Mitch Ratcliffe, our Earth911 publisher. Mitch, how are you today?
Doing great. And looking forward to talking Victorian lawns.
Victorian lawns. That sounds kind of exotic, doesn't it?
Well,
kind of. And we also have our Earth911 writer, Sarah Lozanova. Sarah, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Evelyn.
Great. And what is the weather like in Maine today? Do you have dry lawns around you, or did they stay kind of green this year?
You know, they stayed green. We got a lot of rain in the last couple of weeks, so everything's pretty green at the moment.
Very good. And I am away from Tacoma today, but we're recording at our beautiful Moonyard recording studios. And Doug, how are things in Tacoma today? Is your lawn still green? I know it was raining yesterday when I left.
Well, you know, it's sort of green around the edges because it's attempting to sap whatever moisture there is. But it has been it's been a cool, much cooler summer, and we've had some rain in the last few days. It feels like fall.
Does feel like fall. I agree.
It's muggier than fall, though.
Yeah. Well, I'm down in Los Angeles for a couple of days, and I got to tell you, the lawns, actually, a lot of the lawns are watered down here. So everything looks pretty green when you're at street level, but when you fly in, you see how very brown it all is at the end of summer.
We had an article, Cutting Down on Lawn, Alternative to Grass, and this was by Gemma Alexander a couple of weeks back. We wanted to look at the options people have as an alternative to the lawn, because, of course, we spend a tremendous amount of water and a lot of chemicals on our lawns without really thinking about what that's doing to everything outside the lawn. Yeah, maybe it's green, but you might be polluting groundwater. You are certainly using a lot of water. And as you mentioned, this is a Victorian invention. The reason that the Victorians embraced the lawn was a way of actually showing they had subdued nature. It was like having a well-mown field, and it was pleasant to sit and look at, but it was incredibly wasteful. So we want to think about some alternatives.
I often wonder how much people even enjoy their lawns. Like, so many resources go into cutting them and watering them and fertilizing them, but it seems often just more like a burden, kind of a cultural burden, like something we're supposed to do. As opposed
it's like something we get to talk about and kvetch about rather than they actually appreciate.
Yeah, and how many people are actually, throwing a ball around on their lawn or having a picnic?
Right. I think it's that, Sarah. I think it's that sort of idealized sense of what we will be doing on our lawn. I know we have a very lovely bocce ball set and a lovely croquet set that have never been used on our lawn.
But think about how it would look.
Yes. I always thought about that summer garden party where everyone's over and it'll be so nice. And we've never done it. And I'm talking like over 20 years. We've never done it.
And you still have that bocce set and that croquet set.
Absolutely pristine. Yeah.
Think what you could do with those if you got rid of your lawn. You could give them to children who would appreciate and keep them for 20 years without using them.
That's right. I think they could just get passed on in the aspirational bocce league. Yeah.
Well, so you can take a lot of alternatives for this. One of which is to plant a lot of shrubbery or berry beds, and the other is to just think about replacing the lawn itself. What do you guys? What do you do with your lawns? I can certainly carry on about mine.
Well, we have a very small lawn now in the front of our house, and it's quite small. And I think we'll probably just keep it. If one of the tensions you have in a neighborhood is you don't want to get too extreme, because then your neighbors get a little agitated. And we already have a number of Chinese wind palm trees in our front yard, so we might keep that little patch of lawn. But in the backyard, the dogs have pretty much destroyed all of the lawn. It's more like a doggy racetrack. And so back there, I think the question is what can we put down seed-wise that might stand up to the dog use a bit more and be more pleasant to look at? And I'm kind of thinking that maybe some clover or some other type of green thing that doesn't need to be watered and is pretty hardy might be a good option.
So I tried clover this summer.
What did you think of
with
clover?
My 2 dogs. And the dogs obliterated the clover.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't get a good foothold and grow to resist their claw.
Yeah.
Because they like to skid, they just tear the clover right out. But what we do have is a lot of oxalis growing in lieu of our lawn. And that has made a big difference, along with letting it become mossy, which is easy here in the North, not easy everywhere else. But a combination of moss and oxalis and a little bit of grass has really changed the way we need to care for the lawn. The thing I have to say is the dogs like to pull the moss out.
Yeah.
But other than that, it grows back.
Yeah.
I planted clover in my yard, and I was able to get it established for a couple of years. But then I found out that it wasn't native, and I was wanting to create more native species. And then another thing that a neighbor pointed out, but it didn't end up being a problem, is that it attracts a lot of pollinators. Mm-hmm. So I have kids that tend to walk around barefoot, and so I was kind of holding my breath for a couple summers. But they never got stung, so it didn't end up being an issue. It just seemed like fun. But I think it's that way with anything that attracts pollinators. There's, going to be things that sting flying around.
And I think that's part of living in nature. And we, in fact, put a bee house in our backyard for carpenter and solitary pollinators to use, carpenter bees and solitary pollinators. And it's been fun to watch them move in. But we keep it away from where the dogs and the birds, as we've got a number of bird feeders and my children are too old to get stung by a bee, but it doesn't seem to be a problem. And I also see the benefits in the flowers in the yard as I've made this change. They do seem to be more robust, and I'm seeing more seedlings.
Imagine you build up the organic matter differently in the soil too. Like, I don't think grass is really that great of a crop, whereas native wildflowers and things like that, some of them might have nitrogen fixing properties or things like that. So if you did eventually want to turn it into, say, a vegetable bed, then you've already done some of the work to get that established.
Have you tried ground cover? We suggested succulents in the article. I haven't found succulents work well in my yard, but they might work better in other regions.
Yeah, I don't think they would work in Maine. I tried planting a wildflower mix this year, and maybe I didn't water it enough. It established in part of my yard, but not the other part, which was a little bit disappointing. But I do have a lot of milkweed that just grows naturally. So the milkweed took over, and that was actually kind of welcomed because I ended up getting a lot of monarch butterflies and seeing other pollinators. And that is native. So I would imagine that has a lot of ecological value. So I think I'm going to try to, I guess, gently encourage the milkweed. It can get quite prominent, though.
Well, the other thing that we're looking at is permeable paving stones, so stones that allow the water to pass through into the ground below. And if you don't use some kind of sealing cover like plastic under the pavers or under gravel, that's, I think, the way to go. I would not want to put gravel and plastic down, but pavers and allowing the water to get through. And you can place them separately and then let moss grow between them as well for ornamental look will work well.
Yeah, the house I grew up in, where my parents currently live in, Laguna Beach, California, their backyard is not a big backyard, but it's a patio that has a sort of an awning cover over it, and then extensive beds all around. And it makes for a really nice outdoor living space, so that they eat a lot of their dinners outside, and they have an entertaining area outside. And I think that's kind of ideal in a way, because there's enough gardening that you can grow what you want, but most everything is a pretty easy maintenance.
This is a great starting point, but let's talk about some of the other things that are going on at this time of the year, like allergies. as we move into fall. It's also more fungus or mold and fungus as well. We've got a good article on tips for minimizing home allergies that we wanted to share, which includes a lot of indoor things like reducing the clutter that you have, washing your linens naturally in order to get rid of the dust mites that populate your house. And one that we've recently undertaken and has really made a big difference is not letting the dog sleep in the bed. Hurts the heart, helps the lungs.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to do that. We have 2 dogs that are definitely bed dogs.
Well, in that case, you should at least be putting your pillows and everything, all your bedding into the dryer on high every once in a while. Those mites.
That's what I thought. That was a really interesting part of the article because I tend to want to wash most things on either cold or we have a setting for eco warm that's just warm enough to dissolve the detergent, but not more than that. But I am going to change my practice, and I'm going to do some real hot washes every time I do my bedding, because I do not like the idea of creating a healthy environment for dust mites. I think that is really disturbing.
Mitch, how long did it take for you to notice a difference when the dog stopped sleeping with you?
A couple of weeks, because we had to clean up, and they still jumped up there for the first couple. We bought a cage that they now happily go into because it's a habit they've developed. But it took about 2 weeks before I really felt like I wasn't waking up congested.
Yeah, I was just curious because it seems like allergies can be really hard to pinpoint. And so trying out different things makes a lot of sense. Washing and drying the sheets on high for a month or two, see if it makes a difference. And maybe it doesn't. And then trying some other things I think it gets tricky though when you try a few things at once and then you don't really know what was effective.
Yeah, and the thing is I also have found as I grow older that I develop new allergies or allergies become more severe. So I'm also not exactly sure what I'm responding to all the time.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I don't think we're not aware that we have pet allergies, but we have a number of other allergies, so it's a little bit hard to tell. One of the things we did a few years ago was get rid of all of our carpeting. And that has been enormously helpful, both with the allergies and just since we do have pets in the house. That's the main reason we did it. We had cats at the time, and it just seemed like we had hairballs and all kinds of other things that were, having carpeting was just no longer a successful strategy.
That's something we're considering doing too. And one of the things in the article that was interesting is this marmoleum, which is made from linseed oil instead of PVC. And so you can have a floor that is essentially natural and like linoleum. And that's a lot easier to keep clean than a bare wood floor, because the wood floor is sort of full of cracks and creases.
Right.
Yeah, I think many of the things that can help with home allergies are also just good for indoor air quality in general. Like carpeting is just known for, it holds toxins and dust and all kinds of particles in. It's very hard to clean, and then you might end up keeping it for 10 or 20 years. So it can also be good just for having fewer toxins in the home. And same thing too, another tip that can be helpful is just changing HVAC filters regularly, because they trap a lot of dust particles. And that also has the benefit of making your HVAC system more energy efficient. If those filters aren't changed regularly, it can really kind of clog the system up.
That's interesting, because what I just realized as you were speaking is that now that the bed is cleaner, we're also aware of the bed's age. And the fact that it has 15, 20 years of us lying on its smell.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we've been talking about since we got the dogs out of the bed is, do we need a new bed? And so a lot of this is if you change the inputs that cause the allergies, you suddenly have a different perspective on why and what you're buying matters. And so we might end up going with a new bed. And get a sustainable mattress this time instead of the ones that we have purchased in the past, which are the antithesis of sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that some of the non-toxic latex mattresses can be really good because I believe they don't allow dust mites to live in them.
There are some that have a kind of a resistant cover too. So you've got that ranking article on sustainable mattresses, which I've been looking at and considering as I think about this new mattress. But the other thing is that the sustainable mattresses tend to be these mattress in a box versions, which are a lot less expensive than going out and buying a traditional bed.
Yeah, I think they're probably a little easier to maneuver around too if you are used to, sort of flipping your mattresses over and, doing that every couple of months.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about the other allergy article we had, which is like allergies. Which, for me, I have all these allergies, so this was interesting.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a really interesting article on kids' allergies. I mean, the one thing that I would say that I think we should always say, which is, some allergies are very serious and, you do need to work with your doctor. And if your child or family member needs an inhaler or medication, then that's what they should get. But there are also these natural things that you can do to try to help boost your immune system and try to, aid in fighting allergies or making them less problematic. I know we are very careful now, but I make my own yogurt. And so both my husband and I have noticed that our digestive systems are working better. And I think our allergies are a little better too. And I am chalking it up to the, really robust probiotics we're getting every morning when we eat that yogurt.
Well, one of the suggestions here was to drink unfiltered apple cider vinegar in a glass of water 3 times a day. And this really apparently builds up the enzymes that help us deal with the allergen. And that was an interesting one. The other one that was new to me, this was quercetin, which is a natural bioflavonoid that inhibits histamine release. So it does exactly what the nose spray does, but it does it without the nose spray.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. The apple cider vinegar, I've tried drinking apple cider vinegar at different times. I've never been able to feel that it had a significant impact, but I will say it doesn't taste great. I'm not sure if you could get your kids to drink a glass of water with apple cider vinegar in it 3 times a day. Sarah, have you ever tried anything like this with your kids?
I haven't. Thankfully, they don't have issues with allergies, but my kids really like kombucha. I make my own kombucha, and I wonder if that might have some of the same benefits because it's supposed to have a lot of enzymes and a lot of bacteria. So that might be a more palatable option. I make it myself, and sometimes I ferment it maybe just a day less than I would for myself because my kids like it when it's just a tiny bit sweeter. Some of the store-bought stuff kind of has quite a punch, and I don't know if kids would like it, but that might be a way to kind of sweeten the deal for them, or to just add a tiny bit of fruit juice, just put in an ounce of pineapple juice or something, or mango juice to sweeten it a bit. Yeah,
the cider does not appeal to my taste, and I can't imagine having had my kids drink it on a regular basis without sort of being viewed as an ogre. But this is these options are available, and it isn't necessary to go out and buy drugs. And that's something that also has benefits in terms of the disposal of these materials later on.
Mm-hmm. And there are things that just strengthen the body overall, like having healthier gut bacteria is just a good thing for the immune system in general to fight off colds and to have, effective digestion, all kinds of things. So there's quite a few benefits. My kids, though, by the way, too, they will drink nettle tea. I actually have a nettles patch, and if I give them nettle tea, they'll definitely drink that down. Especially, I was going
to ask you about the nettles. I remember that you said you had nettles and that you harvest them and made a nettle tea out of that.
Yeah, and I'll dry them so I can have them throughout the year. But yeah, it's also a great source of minerals and iron as well. I think it's just good in general to eat as many wild foods as possible because so many of our foods are cultivated and come from, altered genes pools and things like that. So Nettles is a great way to infuse some wild edibles into the diet.
Yeah, I also, having cut down on dairy recently, have noticed that has reduced the overall impact of the sinus allergies that I suffer. So the dietary changes that you're talking about, and starting your kids off in life with those kinds of drinks rather than the sweet, sugary things that we grew up with, is that's an element of progress. We just have to find a way to make it more easily accessible to everybody.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things is all of us are kind of greenish people. Obviously, that's why we're doing this show. And so I think we're more likely to try dietary changes and, grow nettles for nettle tea or make your own yogurt. And I think sometimes, when you hear people talk about that, you think, well, God, that's a lot of extra work and I don't have a lot of extra time, which I agree with 100%. But the nice thing is that, even your regular market now will stock some of these things pretty routinely. And, if you can do something like, adding the kombucha or adding things into your diet that can help you avoid some of these negatives, you will save time and money not having to treat the symptoms if you can figure out the underlying causes.
Well, and we have another article that is related to this, and that is when you do have to turn to medicine, a lot of people end up using inhalers. Mm-hmm. This actually has been the most popular site on the story in the last month. Over the last month, even though it was only published about a week and a half ago, because nobody has an answer about what to do with these things. There's two components to an inhaler. There's the canister that holds the drug, which may be a dry or a mist formula. And that's actually propelled by a different kind of chlorofluorocarbon than was banned about 25 years ago. It's a lot less impactful on the environment, but it is still a chlorofluorocarbon. And that's something to keep in mind if you're making decisions. But obviously, you have to put your health or your children's health first when making these considerations. This is at least better. Those canisters need to be emptied. They can burst if you put them under pressure. So you have to take these back into usually a pharmacy. And there's a number of programs growing up around a process that GlaxoSmithKline, which is one of the biggest manufacturers of inhalers, came up with about 10 years ago and is introduced in the UK. It's called the GSK system. Scheme. And unfortunately, it hasn't really taken hold here in the States, except in a couple of cases where GlaxoSmithKline has partnered with local companies like Walgreens. And so if you do have an inhaler, you need to take that canister back and have it treated as medical waste. But the plastic top, both the cover on the dispenser and the dispenser itself that issues the dose, are just regular plastic. Typically plastics 1 or 3 and sometimes 5. Plastics 1 through 3 are widely recycled, and so you can take those off, put them into your recycling bin, and they should be taken care of if your recycler accepts plastic. So that's a good thing to know. But I was really surprised by how many people responded to the story with, "Wow, I finally know what to do with these things." And so now that we've talked about the natural alternatives, knowing that there are good ways to recycle the non-natural alternatives gives you a lot more choices.
Yeah, I think it does. And this is really, we have some asthma in my family and do have the inhalers. And I don't think we have been disposing of them properly. So I'm going to check with our local pharmacy and see if they will do a take back. So I think we've just been putting them in the trash.
And most people do. 58% of people who were surveyed in the UK do just toss them in the trash.
Yeah. So we will have to stop that. And the nice thing and I know in Washington we have a pretty strong, robust medicine take back program. And I really hope it spreads because this is such a problem for all medications in a couple of ways. One, the medications can be misused or, taken and distributed on the street for, problematic behavior. But even if you try to get rid of them yourself, if you put them in the trash and, don't flush them down the toilet, but I think some people do flush them down the toilet, it's getting into our ecosystem and creating all kinds of problems that we don't even really understand the full extent of because, these these drugs will build up in our, in our ecosystem, in our animals, in our plants, and we don't know what will happen.
In Puget Sound, salmon comes with antidepressants.
Right, which isn't really a marketing positive. I mean, yeah.
Well, I think our hope is that the hopeful thing is that we can use policy to drive this. And in the state of Washington, for instance, we have drug take-back programs that are state-funded. And whether the feds ultimately decide to get more involved in trying to drive recycling, or whether this still does fall on the states and municipalities, those kinds of programs are the right way to think about a community organizing to make sure that we are getting this stuff back out of the system, not just tossing it in the trash.
Yeah. It's interesting to me because it's sort of like, before we were born, long ago, there wasn't sort of good community trash pickup. And it was because trash would build up in people's, in vacant land and other places and create problems with rodents and pestilence and all kinds of things that we developed all of these sanitary landfills and things like that. And this is kind of our modern equivalent of, we have a problem. What are we going to do with it? And I think that responsible state and local governments are working on ways to deal responsibly with this current problem.
Yep. And it's an opportunity for us to, as we go into the 2020 election, make this an issue. And of course it will be.
It definitely will be. So let's turn to Earthling Questions. We have one from Rona on Facebook. This is a really good one, I think. She says, I have recycled number 5 items at Whole Foods for many years. And by number 5 items, I think she means number 5 plastics.
Yes.
And now they don't have it anymore. I have many bags of them to recycle now. And even though they're accepted by the recycling service in my area, I'd really rather put it in a preserve number 5 dedicated drop-off. Can you tell me of somewhere near me that I can take it to?
So this is a great question in the rapidly changing recycling times we're facing. So number 5 plastic is mostly the bags and containers we use for salads and produce. But primarily, that's where you see it in the grocery store most often, is in the produce aisle, and unfortunately, because of all the changes in the way we recycle and who takes our trash overseas, we're in the midst of rebuilding our recycling system here in the United States. And many recyclers, as I mentioned before, aren't taking plastics number 4 through 7. But we're going to get this restored. It will come back. I'm confident of it. And we talked last time about what we're doing with our own recycling service investigation.
Right.
That will be one of the areas we want to focus on, is these very specialized but easy to recycle once you get them sorted out materials like number 5. So right now, Rona's options are pretty limited, but you can search using our search tool at search.earth911.com. Just put choose plastic number 5 as the material and use the zip code, and that'll give you local options. You do, and Rona's really thinking about this the right way. She wants to get it to somebody who's really going to use the material, and that's the big trick in recycling. So it's good that she's thinking about that. And as she keeps asking at Whole Foods or wherever she ends up shopping, if she can't take the Whole Foods experience because of this, she can get this taken care of. We just all need to be asking for this kind of good sorting and processing.
Exactly what I was. So what I was thinking too was that if I was in Rona's shoes, I think the first step I would have is to go to Whole Foods and say, look, this is really important to me. Probably they're using number 5 plastics in their produce aisle. So, Whole Foods, do the right thing here and either help us figure out where we can recycle these items or, stop using them. So I think that would be the starting point. I also heard a story on NPR just a couple of days ago that was talking about the recycling industry, and it had someone, and I'm going to find a link to it and send it to you, Mitch, because I think it might be a good follow-up for a future story. But it had someone in the plastic recycling industry saying, don't think that recycling plastics is dead. It is not. It is very much alive. and it will get stronger, but we need your help. And basically it is, we need you, the consumer, to talk with the product manufacturers and say you want recycled packaging options, because right now, freshly made plastics from virgin ingredients is cheaper to purchase for the manufacturer than recycling and making recycled plastics. Is you can recycle the plastic, but it's going to be a slightly more expensive plastic than brand new virgin created from petrochemicals plastic.
So there's a trick there, but go ahead.
So the thing is sort of like, we want more recycling. We want recycled plastics. We need that circular economy. And the piece that we're not strong enough on yet is the consumer demand.
So the perception that price is the problem is also the problem. Because which price are you paying attention to? Are you paying attention to the price of the material and as part of the packaging of the product you purchased? Or are you paying attention to the price of not recycling the material?
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. You're only looking at that early price.
If you look at the full life cycle, it's actually cheaper, both in terms of carbon emitted into the atmosphere, which is, we're basically every year borrowing more than $250 billion from our children just for carbon dioxide social costs. Mm-hmm. But also, less power used to reprocess, 70% less power to make new plastic from old than to make plastic from oil. The other thing is we're subsidizing globally the petrochemical industry, which makes plastics, to the tune of about $5 trillion a year globally. So that money's coming out of our pocket already, and that lower price is just a distraction from the real change we need to make, which is to go to the manufacturers and say, we want a complete change in the impact of our shopping.
Yeah. But I agree with you completely. But I do think that the consumer doesn't realize how much power that we potentially have.
Yeah, it's just like
we get activated.
If we told our vote doesn't matter, that is the most ludicrous and poisonous idea in a democracy. And the same is true in a market environment. The customer is ultimately the one who's going to shell out the money. Unfortunately, right now, we've got an administration that also shells out $5 trillion a year in support of the petrochemical.
Yeah. Right. But that's why states and local elections are so important.
Indeed, you do.
Yeah. So this next question is actually, I just tried one of these for myself recently. So this is kind of interest to me. So Justin asked on the Earthling forum, he says, I run a small coffee shop, so I'm painfully aware of all the waste created by plastic cups, lids, etc. So I'm constantly working on minimizing that waste. A big trend in coffee shops right now that seems like a good idea are strawless lids. It made sense to me, so I thought we would try it. I'm all for reducing straws, even if their role in the ocean plastic crisis is a bit overplayed. Waste is waste. Just curious if anyone has any input or perspective on this issue. I don't want to inadvertently increase the cost on the planet when I'm trying to help it.
So this is a great question, and it's great to see a business person thinking about it too.
So, and the interesting thing is I think that the questions you need to ask are, what's your strawless lid made of? And where does it come from and how does it work? And I'll tell you, the ones that I've tried at Starbucks with the cold drinks, they're very much like the hot coffee cup lids, kind of a sippy cup. They're clear and they're a sippy cup. And I will say I have talked to a few people who've said, well, this is great and all, but I still want a straw. I don't want the cold liquid hitting my lips like this. I don't want and I don't want little ice chips getting in also. So I'm not sure that the strawless lid on a cold drink is going to satisfy the person who wants a cold drink with a straw.
Well, and this was another element of Justin's question, which I cut down a little bit for length. And he was saying that it seems like these lids weigh more than the plastic lids he uses on a regular
I think that's true.
Coffee. And I actually have a couple of them sitting right here on my desk that I've been looking at. But they are compostable. But they have to go into an industrial composting system. You can't just take them home and toss them into your compost and expect them to break down. So there's a lot of different variations on what compostable is. The other thing you have to take into account with all of this is how far does this material have to be moved in order for you to have the strawless lid and then to have it recycled. And we don't necessarily have good, solid local recycling options that can take this stuff, put it into industrial compost, or if you're using the regular plastic lids, recycle the plastic lids. So rethinking the recycling infrastructure to get it to somebody near you who can process it is a potential huge bonanza for the economy.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. I think if I was a coffee shop owner, I would maybe take a little bit of, buy some, but take a little bit of time to survey my customers, because if they're going to want a straw anyway, then it may not be a worthwhile change. And if you can affect customer behavior by giving them a slight discount, let's say, 5 cents off if they bring their own straw, if they bring a metal straw or a wooden straw or something, that might be a good option.
Yeah, the other thing to do is use this choice as a way of getting them to tell you what they really want. If they want a straw, would they take a paper straw?
Right.
That's another easy way to solve this problem. Don't dispose of plastic, dispose of paper. You want to pick a straw, one that will actually break down, that's not plastic coated. But again, because he's thinking about this, Justin's asking all the kinds of questions that are going to result in an actual change, because when he buys these lids or straws, he buys them by the thousands.
Right.
His customers can have a huge impact by giving him that feedback. So the other thing is, Justin, there will be more choices available to you, because as Starbucks and other major coffee cup and drink cup users invest in more compostable or recyclable options, those are going to be available to everybody else in the market as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I definitely think, the coffee consumers are interested in this, and they are paying attention. So I think this is an area where, you will see rapid changes. Well, let's sign go ahead.
So the Earthling Forum has been quite busy recently, and so we have another question from there. Yeah.
So Ms. Indiana asked on the Earthling Forum, this is an interesting question. I hadn't ever thought of this. I hadn't even really been aware of this practice, but can electroplated plastics, polystyrene in particular, such as electroplated silver, gold, and rose gold plastic cutlery, be recycled? If it requires special equipment and or processes, what % of recyclers have such equipment?
It's a great question. I mean, we had to go do some real research to answer this question.
Yeah, I didn't even know about this plastic metal plated cutlery.
Well, you'll see it sometimes, particularly at catered events.
That's what I was thinking, like for wedding receptions, I can really, especially like when the rose gold, I thought, that would be pretty. I bet that's for weddings and other events like that.
Yeah, and it's just metal that's literally plated onto the plastic. And the problem is that it is a composite material, which makes it not recyclable in the traditional waste stream. There are ways to, and there are improving methods to shred and separate the electroplating from the plastic. In other words, to get the plastic off the metal. And it's not really widely available right now. We looked into it. There's a couple of new machines coming out that do this. But the other problem is that the process isn't particularly efficient. You lose at least 30% of the metal material in the process, which means that's ending up in the waste stream. And the plastics itself, if they aren't really thoroughly cleaned of the metal, can't be recycled either. So it's really probably a better idea not to buy those. And if you do buy those and use them, to find a specialty recycler, plastics recycler, who has the technology. We don't have this information in our database right now, so we can't really say how many organizations have it. But based on just the general approach to plastic right now, this is something that is very limited in its availability in the United States.
Yeah. And there's certainly places where plastic cutlery is sort of the logical thing to use. But I do wish we saw more caterers at events, using traditional metal cutlery and just, washing it and reusing it later.
I'll take bamboo flatware.
Yeah, bamboo flatware is a really good option too. And it's very attractive as well. Yeah.
And it breaks right down.
Nice. All right. Well, this has been very interesting. Some good discussions today, I think. Anything before we sign off, Mitch?
Well, folks, the iRecycle app is back. check it out at earth911.com. You can download and search for the material you need to recycle, get a map to where you're going, and also tap one number and call them to confirm that they're still taking what you want to give them. So iRecycle's there. Get using it and do a better job of recycling.
Absolutely. And, listeners, give us some feedback on how that's going for you.
The questions we're hearing here, use the Earthling Forum, which is, you can find it on the Earth911 homepage. It's it's not new anymore, but it's starting to be populated with a really good conversation amongst people who want to share information about recycling.
Excellent. So that's it for this episode of Sustainability in Your Ear. We hope you will tune in and join the conversation. You can always send us an email at feedback@earth911.com. Go check out the Earthling forums, get involved in the conversation, and you can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spreaker, all of your basics podcast platforms, and of course always at the earth911.com website, where all of our excellent stories are located too. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.